And the Oscar goes to...
The Game of the Year award goes to...
And the Oscar goes to...
And the winner is...
And the Oscar goes to...
And the winner is...
And the Oscar goes to...
And the Game Award goes to...
And the Oscar goes to...
And the winner is...
And the winner is... Albert S. Ruddy. Godfather.
Skyrim.
12 Years a Slave.
The Last of Us.
Parasite.
It's a clean sweep. The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King.
Hi, I'm David.
And I'm Sarah.
Today we're asking the question, is there an award bait equivalent for video games? To do that, we need to define what traits award bait projects usually have, and what the ramifications of those traits are for a certain piece of media.
The term Oscar bait gets thrown around a lot during movie award season. They often feature famous actors. They don't make as much money as blockbuster films. There are a lot of them set during World War II. The films usually are about something along the lines of homosexuality, disability, or racial tension, or a combination of all three. Some also feature people struggling or succeeding in the arts, though this isn't unique to the Oscars necessarily, it's more just a film staple from the early years of filmmaking. Oscar bait films are usually released in the fall-winter months because blockbuster films are usually slated to be released in the summertime. These movies use the Oscars as a way of marketing a newly released film. For your consideration is often used in the promotional material, and if there is a win, it usually means a considerable increase in box office revenue. Even now, there are websites dedicated to the For Your Consideration campaigns of different films, hoping to get nominated for an Oscar and other awards. And there's usually yelling, lots of yelling.
My child! I've abandoned my boy!
In recent years, there's been a negative connotation associated with the films being termed Oscar bait, as though the film's existence is only to win awards, that it was created for that and therefore feels more like a product and less like art. There are clear indicators of what makes an Oscar bait film, enough so that many people who don't know anything about artsy films can pinpoint them.
I mean, I don't think we really need another film about the Holocaust, do we? It's like, how many have there been? You know, we get it, it was grim, move on. No, I'm doing it because I've noticed that if you do a film about the Holocaust, guaranteed an Oscar.
What about video games?
All right, and the Game Award for Game of the Year goes to God of War.
There are plenty of awards given to video games, and every year certain games are hailed as Game of the Year. The question is there an Oscar or award bait equivalent for video games? Specifically, we will be focusing on Best Picture winners and nominations and Game of the Year winners and nominations. There are a lot of different awards out there, and each category could get their own video. So for the sake of the argument, we'll use those categories as our examples. In order to make a fair comparison, we're going to go into the history and the reasoning behind making an Oscar bait film. The Oscars used to be filled with the highest grossing films of the year. Now it's filled with films many people haven't seen or heard of before, and the public seems to use the word negatively. Shouldn't the films we award be receiving recognition because they reflect the best in movies? How did we get here, and why? It really all started in 1978. The movie Deer Hunter had an abysmal test screening. The movie was really depressing, and the producers didn't know how to market the movie to the public. Alan Carr, coming off producing Grease, proposed marketing the film as an Oscar contender, as this was the only way to get people to watch the movie. Market it to the artsy film people in LA and New York who will talk enough buzz to get people to see it. And it worked.
And the winner is... The Deer Hunter.
The film ended up going home with the Best Picture win at the Oscars and gaining a wide release. A lot of producers saw this format of marketing a film and followed suit. Many artsy films since then have been marketed this way because mainstream audiences don't usually go for these types of movies. Gabriel Rossman, a sociologist who studied Oscar bait films at the University of California, said, We found that audiences don't like the kind of aesthetics that are characteristic of Oscar-worthy movies. The movies tend to be serious and depressing, and audiences don't like that. So making Oscar-y movies is a riskier strategy than the average moviegoer might appreciate. Ira Kolb also studied Oscar award-winning films at the University of Southern California, saying, "When used in marketing campaigns, this validation stamp increases the desire of moviegoers to see the films and the talent being honored. It also keeps the movies in theaters longer, boosting box office receipts. And it substantially increases DVD, streaming, download, and cable TV revenues." Kolb cites The King's Speech as an example. They received 12 nominations, and the estimate of how much money the movie would make went from $30 million at the box office to $200 million. After it won Best Picture and increased the movie's revenue even more, it ended up grossing almost $500 million. So this movie that was only supposed to gross $30 million, which would have covered the cost of making the film, grossed more than 15 times that amount for having a successful award season.
Well, that's a side of you we don't get to see all that often.
No, we're not supposed to, really. Not publicly.
One huge figure in the history of Oscar bait films was Miramax Pictures. Started in the late 1970s, they were bought by Disney in 1993. Because of this financial backing, they were able to enter the independent film market, and they did this exceptionally well. They took what Alan Carr did to the extreme. Miramax especially was known for different sorts of ploys to get people to watch or nominate their movies. They used tactics like traveling to popular actors or filmmakers' vacation spots to show their films, to calling people at home, and even showing films in the motion picture retirement home. Academy members still lived there, even if they couldn't actually go out to the movies. They had a showing for Imitation Game hosted by Mark Zuckerberg. It wasn't for Academy members, because that's against Academy rules, but it was for people in Silicon Valley who would talk about the movie to their friends who were either filmmakers or Academy members. The most egregious example of this was the campaign for the 1999 film Shakespeare in Love. Miramax spent $5 million on the marketing campaign, which was an unprecedented amount even by today's standards. They held a Welcome to America party for James Madden, the director of the film. They invited Academy members, which should have been against the rules. But Miramax's producers got around it by saying, "I'm sorry there were Academy members present, but it was a press event, and you have to have celebrities at a press event to get the press there." Needless to say, it worked. It beat out Saving Private Ryan for Best Picture that year. Miramax continued using their bully campaign tactics for many, many years. Ever since Shakespeare in Love won Best Picture, the term Oscar bait has been used as a negative term to describe films made just for winning awards.
What do we do now? The show must, go on.
This peaked in 2011 with the film Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. It was cited as a blatant Oscar bait film. It stars Sandra Bullock and Tom Hanks, among other regular Oscar nominees. The story is about a young boy who has autism spectrum disorder that is trying to make sense of his father's death after 9/11. It was not well received, with a critical score of 45% on Rotten Tomatoes. It was very polarizing at the time of its release. Some critics thought it was a fantastic story about 9/11. Others thought that it was just trying to get an Oscar. Because of the polarization of the film, other award ceremonies like the Golden Globes and the British Academy Film Awards, or the BAFTAs, did not nominate it for anything at all. However, it did get a Best Picture nomination at the Oscars. It was seen as the Academy nominating obvious Oscar bait. Oscar bait films continue to be made. In 2019, Green Book won Best Picture, despite it being criticized for its portrayal of the white savior trope. This is common in many Oscar bait films like The Help or The Blind Side. You would think by now that with all the discourse about the trope that movies like this wouldn't win Best Picture. It doesn't help that in 2020, 84% of the Academy voter base is still white. It is impossible to please everyone in an award show, but it does seem like the Academy has noticed not only a decline in viewership, but also a shift in people thinking that the Oscars don't mean much at all. With a mostly white, male, cisgender, and straight voter base, a lot of what is deemed as great thus far has been defined by a very homogenous group of people. The Academy knows this is a problem and is taking steps to be more inclusive by changing what can be These changes will hopefully introduce more diverse cast, content, and crews. The rules don't go into effect until 2024. Will this change what Oscar bait films look like in the future? I'd like to think so. Will they even exist? We'll have to wait until the 2024 awards to find out. To summarize, filmmakers create Oscar bait films to make money and give themselves publicity about making great films. The strategy has been shown to give films a significant box office boost if they are nominated, and especially if they win. However, there are also a lot of negative connotations coming with being defined as an Oscar bait film, to the point where the Oscars have completely changed their rules to combat it. Oscar bait films are basically a specific way of marketing a movie.
Oh, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. The great Oz has spoken.
Oscar bait films have made people a lot of money, and both built and destroyed reputations. However, they're a more recent trend within the film industry, having only cropped up within the last 40 years or so. The video game industry really only got going in the last 40 years as well. So what would an award bait video game look like? The very first industry game award given out was in 1980 by the magazine Electronic Games. At that time, the game that they chose as Game of the Year was Space Invaders. If we look at Pong as the start of the video game industry, that means that the first industry award given was only 8 years after the establishment of the medium as a commercially viable business. Compared to the film industry, the scale of the timeline is a little different. If it took the film industry nearly 50 years before the Oscar bait film was codified by Deer Hunter, it's safe to say that the video game industry still hasn't reached the point where award bait games are truly mainstream. There are some examples of games that appear to have been made primarily to win awards, but generally award-winning games do well financially before they're nominated or win. For the purposes of this examination, we looked at a few of the biggest awards shows in the video game industry today: the BAFTAs, the Game Developers' Choice Awards, and the Game Awards. Out of those three, the Game Awards are the most like the voting process of the Oscars, whereas the Game Developers' Choice Awards are given by the closest equivalent to the Academy. Oscar nominations are decided by a selected group of people who work within the film industry. Nominees are decided by those who work in that field, such as actors picking Best Actor nominees or directors choosing Best Director nominees. After being nominated by direct peers, the entire Academy votes to choose the winners. Started in 2000, the Game Developers' Choice Awards are similar. According to their website, any professional game developer who is a part of the International Choice Awards Network, which is an invitation-only group, is allowed to nominate games. Once the nomination process is over, all members of the International Choice Awards Network vote to choose a winner. In the 20 years of GDCA, the nominees are generally well-received, financially successful games. We see a lot of first-person shooters, open-world action games, or RPGs get nominated. However, there are other notable exceptions like Guitar Hero and Untitled Goose Game, which, while falling into more niche genres, are also critically reviewed and financially successful. Are these games marketed to be winners of awards? No, generally not. Sometimes, smaller studios or indie game developers will use Game Award nominations or wins as part of their advertising after the fact. But you don't see many companies using awards as part of their marketing early in their game's lifecycle. There are the occasional Game of the Year editions of games, though that has been controversial at times. For example, Dead Island released a Game of the Year edition, and it was only named Game of the Year by game critics. No one else really made mention of it in that way. There isn't substantial enough evidence to make a case for Game of the Year games making more money for developers. In fact, developers are bypassing any kind of need for awards these days by re-releasing games using the vernacular, Definitive Edition, Director's Cut, Ultimate Collection, or some other clever marketing term that has to do with the game specifically instead. It seems as though most nominees are generally high on the chart of best-selling games, with a few exceptions for smaller indie games. Compared to the Oscars, the last time a best-selling film was nominated for Best Picture was Black Panther in 2019. The last time the best-selling film also won Best Picture was Lord of the Rings: Return of the King in 2004. But what of the artsy games? Artsy films have been nominated more often in the past few decades compared to earlier eras, but the same isn't necessarily true of games. Indie games made by smaller teams are generally known as being more artistic. than the big AAA games. One prominent example is the game Gone Home from 2013. It's been cited by reviewers as an answer to the question, are games art? In Gone Home, you play as a young woman who comes home to find everyone gone. The point of the game is to find out where everyone is. There isn't any fighting or really any puzzles. Honestly, the gameplay is mostly just walking around and looking at things. It's not a particularly long or complicated game, maybe taking 2 hours to play through. Is it an award bait game? Well, it was nominated for Game of the Year at the 2013 Game Developers' Choice Awards next to games like The Last of Us, Grand Theft Auto V, Super Mario 3D World, and Tomb Raider. It's no surprise that it didn't win that year, since The Last of Us revolutionized the game industry, which is a complicated enough topic that we would need a whole other video to explain it. But it was nominated all the same.
Come find me. Gone Home. And let's just drive.
Gone Home sold decently for an indie game, but it wasn't even the best-selling indie game of that year. That probably belongs to The Stanley Parable, or Surgeon Simulator. It's kind of hard to track down exact sales numbers. Looking at some of the data points we were able to track down for Gone Home, being nominated didn't particularly affect its sales trajectory. As the years have gone by, more indie games are being nominated for Game of the Year awards across different organizations, such as Disco Elysium, Outer Wilds, and Untitled Goose Game in 2019, Celeste and Return of the Obra Dinn in 2018, and many more. We'll probably see more and more indie games break into the mainstream as game development becomes more accessible. And I imagine some indie game studios will adopt the strategy of making extremely high-concept, artistic games with the intent to win awards. However, for the time being, award bait games are not really a feasible financial strategy like it might be for films. It also appears that the video game industry itself wants to avoid having award bait games become the norm. The ability for filmmakers to campaign their films for Oscar nominations and wins has tarnished the reputation of the awards show in the eyes of the public. The Game Awards, which was established in 2014, clearly aims to avoid that reputation. Learning from how campaigning fundamentally shifted how the Oscars run, the Game Awards prohibits campaigning in any form. From their website, in order to ensure the credibility of the voting process, the Game Awards maintains a strict no campaigning policy. Publishers and developers are asked to avoid any communication that could be interpreted as campaigning for nomination. Any violations of this policy are reviewed and may lead to the disqualification of a title or, in extreme cases, disqualification of an entire publisher's slate from awards eligibility in any given year. On the other hand, the BAFTAs allow for campaigning, but only in order to make sure that a reviewing member has a copy of the game to play. Any communication outside of that is prohibited. We'll see how that works out for them, since the Oscars effectively have the same rule, but that hasn't stopped the campaigning marketing strategy for Oscar bait films. The video game industry is still young enough that award bait games have yet to become a viable business strategy. The games that tend to win Game of the Year are those that received both critical and public acclaim, and also sold really well. Oscar bait films no longer seem to have the holy trinity of critical acclaim, public sentiment, and box office sales the way that Game of the Year nominees generally do. We don't know what the future holds for the Oscars or for Game Awards shows, but we do know one thing. Someone, somewhere, will still disagree with what should have won that award.
Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed our video. Comment what you think about award bait games. If you liked the video, David and I are going to make some more, so subscribe to see more videos.